The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. One of the scribes came to Jesus and asked him, "Which is the first of all the commandments?" Jesus replied, "The first is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." The scribe said to him, "Well said, teacher. You are right in saying he is one, and there is no other than he. And to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is worth more than all burnt offerings and sacrifices." And when Jesus saw that he answered with understanding, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And no one dared to ask him any more questions. The Gospel of the Lord. Scribes were very important people in the society of Jesus' day. The Greek word nomikos translates as something more than a lawyer. A scholar of the law would be the best way of describing these scribes. People feared them, they held them in awe. These men, believe it or not, from the time that they were kindergartners, for goodness sake, were placed under the care and the tutelage of a rabbi. They spent their whole life studying the law, all 613 commandments, and then all the other commandments that had been built upon the commandments. And so it's kind of surprising on one hand that this scribe comes talking to Jesus about what's the greatest of all the commandments, because most of the scribes would have considered Jesus nothing more than a country bumpkin from up north in the little podunk town of Nazareth. But this scribe evidently was concerned about his salvation. And so there was a debate going on among the scribes. What commandment did you absolutely have to obey in order to make it to heaven for sure? Which one's the most important? And so this man is earnest. He's humble. And he comes up to Jesus and he wants Jesus' opinion. And Jesus will do something interesting. He will take two great commandments from the Old Testament, one found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, and the other found in the book of Leviticus chapter 19, 18, and he puts them together and says they are actually one. When I think of this story, I often think of the Reese's Cup commercial of several years ago. You probably remember that. One guy walking down the hallway with a large block of chocolate and another guy walking down another hallway with a tub of peanut butter. They don't see one another and they run into one another. The chocolate submerges into the peanut butter and the Reese's Cup is born. Well, that's basically what Jesus has done. He tells the guy that these two commandments are the great one. They have to be obeyed. And the fact that Jesus combined these two commandments is actually revealing. Because you see, everybody knew Deuteronomy 6, verse 5. In fact, it was actually called a prayer, the Shema Israel. Every devout Jew had to pray it 5 times a day minimum. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love him with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. But it's that second one that was a problem. Because you see, neighbor at the time of Jesus was defined as someone who looked like me, thought like me, act like me, dressed like me, lived like me, ate like me. A clone of myself. Or in other words, another Jew. Non-Jews were heathen, pagans, outcasts. But as we will see, Jesus' understanding of neighbor is much broader than what the law of the day said. He said neighbor is everyone who lives and breathes in the Lord our God. Now, What's the point of this passage for us? Well, we all know that we're supposed to put God first. We all know that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know that. And you do that quite well. Mass is the ultimate way that we put God first. But it's that second commandment that has been a problem for people throughout history. My neighbor. Who is my neighbor? I would like to suggest to you this morning that the neighbor is someone we see, and the neighbor is someone we do not see. First of all, the neighbor we see. Sometimes we have a tough time loving that neighbor. There's something about that person that absolutely turns us off. And I would like to share with you a story. This story comes from a Franciscan nun by the name of Sister Josie Hobday. And she tells about something that happened one Thanksgiving when she was a little girl living at home. She said, "My mother loved older people. When we were children, she used to send us off with gifts for them. A plate of cookies, freshly baked bread, Easter eggs in a basket. She was always looking out for older people. One day, she sent me to visit an old woman named Mrs. Casey. It was a very difficult mission for a child because Mrs. Casey had cancer, and as a result, she had no nose. Her face was bandaged from her eyes to her mouth. Her disease also caused a bad smell. Visiting Mrs. Casey was a real ordeal, particularly since my mother expected me to sit and talk and spend some time with her. After a couple of visits, I told my mother to have one of my brothers visit Mrs. Casey instead. I didn't want to see her anymore. That was all my mother needed to make sure I kept going over to see Mrs. Casey. Mean mother she had. I dreaded it every time, but I always sat down and visited like my mother wanted. Well, one day in November, my mother announced she was inviting Mrs. Casey over for Thanksgiving dinner. I objected, saying that her smell would ruin my dinner. My mother told me I was going to have to adjust because Mrs. Casey didn't have any place else to go. I thought about the baked turkey and the pumpkin pies and my all-time favorite, Thanksgiving favorite, sweet potatoes. Not wanting to miss any of it, I told my mother I would sit at the other end of the table. But on Thanksgiving Day, my mother sat me directly across from Mrs. Casey. Mean mother, huh? I kept my eyes down and tried to be polite, but it was difficult, especially when the sweet potatoes started coming around. They were filled with marshmallows and brown sugar just the way I liked them. But as the sweet potatoes came to my brother, he took two. That was against the rule in our house. You took one of everything until you were sure everyone else had one. But he thought he was being smart. He could see I was the last one being served, and I wouldn't get any if he took two. He also knew that with all the company present, I couldn't object as surely as I would have done otherwise. Well, when the sweet potato platter got to Mrs. Casey, she counted the number of people and saw that I wouldn't get any. So she passed it on without taking one. When it got to me, there was still one left. I felt terrible. I took it. And I'm glad to say I had the good grace to cut it in half and offer a portion to Mrs. Casey. When I did that, a strange thing happened. She didn't smell bad anymore. She looked like a lovely person. She smiled back at me, took the potato, and we had a great Thanksgiving dinner. Later, when I learned about the life of St. Francis before I became a Franciscan nun, I came to see this Thanksgiving encounter as similar to the conversion experience St. Francis had when he embraced the leper on the road one day. I learned never to let a scar on someone's outside, no matter how ugly it might be, keep me from seeing the beauty they have on the inside. Mean mother she had. But what a powerful lesson, and probably the reason she became a Franciscan nun. But there's another problem we have with people we see. Maybe we wish that they would vaporize. I'm talking about people who have hurt us deeply in this life, who've gossiped about us, sniped us, viciously attacked us behind our back. I'm talking about relatives and family that broke our hearts because we feel betrayed by them. So often people will come in and talk, especially during the season of Lent, and say, Father, how can I love this person? You have no idea what they did to me. And sometimes they'll share with me the stories, and it hurts. It hurts to hear the stories because you say to yourself, how do you love somebody like that? Well, the answer came to me a number of years ago in prayer. I always tell people this: do you buy what Jesus says? And they always say, sure, Father. Do you buy everything Jesus says? Sure, Father. Do you buy Matthew 25? What does he say there? Catholics, you see, don't know the scripture. And I says, Jesus says this: when did you see me hungry and feed me? When did you see me thirsty and give me drink? When did you see me sick and take care of me? And my point is this: if that relative or that friend that hurt you so deeply is lying on the ground, dying of thirst, they're terribly thirsty, and you had the means to give them cool water to drink, would you do that? You know what? Not one person has ever said, no way. They always would. I remember one woman said to me, well, if I gave him the last couple grinds of coffee in my morning coffee cup and poured it on him, would that count? I said, no. It has to be cool water to drink. Even he said so. The bottom line, you would. No matter how mean-spirited you could be, you would do that for someone because you have compassion in your heart. And I don't worry about anybody in this room doing so this morning. But if you can do that, if you can do that bare minimum for that neighbor you see that you do not like, then guess what? You've got room to grow. So start out with a few cups of water and then move on to more, to the point where you actually can love them as Christ would love them. But you got to start somewhere, and sometimes the basics are the best place. But this morning, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the neighbor you don't see. I'm talking about the 4,000 on average babies that we abort here in the United States of America. Did I say 4,000 on average? Yes, I said 4,000 on average. And in the United States, we also carry out the hideous practice of late-term abortions. Or in other words, in America, our laws say that a person can have an abortion up to the moment of delivery. Now you may be saying to yourselves, how could you possibly destroy a fully formed baby? It happens all the time. I'd like to share with you a story, and I do have a witness to this story, but he left, Dr. Stephen Presbus. He's a member of our parish. He's back there with his little girl. Stephen probably remembers this quite well because he was in high school probably when Jill Swartz was in the parish up in Wheeling. Do you remember Jill? He's shaking his head yes. So if you need a witness to my story, right there's one, Dr. Stephen Presbus. Jill came in off the streets one day to an RCIA class years ago, back in the 90s. She told me she came from a staunch Methodist family, from a long line of Methodists, but she said she'd been watching a little bit of EWTN, you know, Mother Angelica's station, and she felt an attraction to Catholicism. And so I said, well, the RCIA is a place for you to come. And she came to every class. Jill Swartz was married to a man named Bill, who happened to be an Orthodox Christian, and they had a little boy named Michael. Michael, I think, was about 3 years old at the time she entered the RCIA. She went through it, she completed it, she became a very devout, wonderful Catholic. She really enjoyed her faith. Well, after a couple of years, I thought to myself, you know what? Jill can do something for us. So I walked up to her one day and I said, Jill, are you still enjoying your Catholic faith? She said, yeah, I really am. And I said, good. You're going to be my RCIA director starting this year. And she knew better than to say no. And you know what? She was outstanding. She was very bright, beautiful blonde hair, blue eyes, very bright, wonderful personality. But she was incredibly serious about her faith. She was the perfect person to lead the RCIA. Well, after a couple of years of leading the RCIA, Jill got pregnant, and then a problem happened in her third trimester. She told me that they discovered that she had breast cancer. The problem was her doctor wanted her to pull the baby out then, at the beginning of the third trimester, because they said that her tumor was estrogen fed. They said her body is excreting all this estrogen, and it's just complicating things. And Jill refused to have her baby taken. She said, I will bring this baby to full term. Whenever God wants this baby to come out, this baby will come out. And she was resolute. So many friends, even some family members said, Jill, please let them take the baby now. Let them take the baby now so that you can get the chemotherapy you need. And Jill refused to do it. She would not do it. She went full term to the day and delivered an 8-pound, beautiful little boy named Philip, who has blonde hair and blue eyes, looks just like his mother. Well, as the doctor had said that they were losing time each day she wasn't getting chemo, he was right. Because not too long after they took Philip naturally, it was discovered that the cancer had metastasized to her femur. Fortunately, one of our parishioners up there, who was an outstanding orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Stephen Miller, came forward and did the surgery for Jill. And he put in a couple metal plates which helped her to be able to walk, and she continued to lead the RCIA. But then the cancer spread to her liver. And I'm telling you what, that whole community, just like we have for Sue Ellen Ensign over there, that whole community became a bonded community that prayed and fasted for Jill. They did research. Everybody was going on the internet, talking to every doctor they knew to see if we could find some kind of cure for Jill's cancer. And so I remember one morning I was shaving, doing my morning routine, listening to WTAE out of Pittsburgh, when I heard the announcer say something about a new discovery for treatment of liver cancer at Ohio State University. And I listened to it, and I couldn't quite understand what they were getting at, but I quickly picked up the phone and I called Jill's sister, Jody. And I said, Jody, you're not going to believe what I just heard on television. She said, I was hearing it too while I was blow drying my hair. She said, what are we going to do? And I said, I know what to do. A few years earlier, I had converted a man who would become the CEO of the Catholic hospital up there, Dr. Donald Hoffreiter. So I called Doc Hoffreiter as soon as I got dressed and everything, and I said, Doc, do you know anything about this new treatment? And he said, yeah. He said, I heard about it and saw it in one of my journals. And I said, how can we get Jill secured at Ohio State? And he smiled and he said, you know what? He said, I know the CEO of Ohio State Hospital. So he picked up the phone and he called this guy, and we had Jill scheduled for one of these treatments. The treatment was a difficult treatment. It basically entailed going into the liver area that was affected by the tumors and burning the tumors. I remember Jill had a lot of discomfort from that procedure. But you know what? It bought her more time. But the bottom line was, after a while, the cancer got the upper hand, and Jill would give her life. She would die, but not without bringing into this world her baby Philip. My point is this. You always hear about the life of the mother, the life of the mother. What do you do in situations? Is it okay to have abortions in the case of the life of the mother? You know what? I'm looking around here and I'm seeing a lot of moms. And I tell you what, not one of you would choose your life over the life of your baby. nor would Jill. She became a saint in my eyes. And you know what? Not one time did that woman ever say, "Why me? Why me?" For Jill, there was no choice. She was going to fight with everything she had, and she did, but nobody was going to hurt her baby. And she brought him into the world. Now, why do I tell you this story? Like I say, we abort 4,000 of those little babies every day. But I tell you this also before the election, because our president, when he was senator in Illinois, did something repulsive to me, obnoxious to me. And to those of you who are Catholic, it will have the same effect on you. Here's what he did. The federal government unanimously, Senate and Congress unanimously passed legislation called the Born Alive Act in the year 2002. What did the Born Alive Act say? It said that it was illegal to destroy a fetus that had somehow survived a botched abortion. You see, the procedure was, if a baby somehow made it through a late-term abortion, what you would do is take that baby, put it in a room, close the door, and you walk off and you let the baby die. We treat our animals that we euthanize better than that. But that's what was being done. And so Democrats, Republicans, all members of Congress got together and voted unanimously to pass this Born Alive Act. And President Bush signed it into law in August of 2002. You can go Google it and see this. There was in this Born Alive Act what was called a neutrality clause, and that was put there to appease the liberals. What it said basically was, by allowing this baby that survived, this fetus, that survived this botched abortion to live, you can't kill it, you have to allow it to live and help it, we are not giving this fetus legal status. Basically, they're saying this thing that comes out of the woman, it's not a person, but we have to save it anyway. The ridiculous thinking, but that's all right, it got passed. But here's what was so repulsive. Senator Obama argued in the Senate of Illinois that he didn't want that law to become law in the state of Illinois. It was already passed by the federal government, so he really couldn't stop it. But he argued against it in the Illinois Senate. And then after some pressure, he relinquished and then allowed the bill to pass. But my point is this. What President Obama did as a senator of the United States showed me his real stripes. He is opposed to the gift of human life all the way up to the moment of delivery. He is so radically pro-abortion. And that's not all. He also has allowed to happen the Health and Human Services mandate, which became the law of the land back at the end of January of this year. What did that mandate say? It said that employers must supply for their employees abortifacient drugs, abortion-inducing drugs, the morning after pill, contraceptives, and sterilization procedures. Must by law do so. That became the law of the land August 2012. The Catholic Church was given a one-year exemption to comply. We have till August of 2013 before we will be forced to pay for abortion-inducing drugs, contraceptives, and sterilization. Procedures that go against Catholic teaching and Catholic faith. Now, there was a compromise was struck, and I remember seeing a talk given by Catherine Sebelius and the president saying that, well, we've reached a compromise. And the compromise was this, and it was laughable. The compromise was, well, Catholic Church, you don't have to pay for this stuff, your insurance companies will. And I started laughing. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Who pays our insurance company? The Catholic Church. So what do you mean a compromise? Here's the point I'm trying to make. What Jill Swartz did for her little Philip was slapped in the face by this president when he was a senator and is still being slapped around. Anybody that's pro-abortion, that is running for political office, is making a mockery of Jill Swartz's death. And my brothers and sisters, that goes against the Catholic faith. We can't allow that to happen. So, this coming Tuesday, everything's on the line. It is, without a doubt, the most important election in the history of Catholics in the United States. Our freedom to practice the beliefs that we have practiced for 2012 years are now being put on the line. What I'm praying for you is this. When you go to vote on Tuesday, close your eyes and picture a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl named Jill Swartz. And you know what? Say a prayer and you'll do the right thing.